Welcome everyone to the weekly live stream we do. We're a bunch of Bitcoiners. We like to talk about some Bitcoin news from the past week, answer your questions. If you guys have any questions, comment them in the live chat. We will get to them eventually. My name's Forrest Hodel, Bitcoin Not Crypto. You're watching on this channel. John from My Favorite Thing About Bitcoin and Ralph from Nurse Hodel. We might be joined by others throughout this call as well. We'll see. A few people had to cancel. Aren't able to make it, so we will see. Anyway, let's get to the first thing on the docket. This is actually pretty big news by the announcer himself, Dennis Porter. I finally had something notable to announce. I'm just joking a little bit, but New Hampshire becomes first state to pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill into law. So for weeks and weeks, months even, people have been talking about, different bills, different states and all that, that have bills that either have Bitcoin reserves or allow people to have some sort of be able to run nodes or self-custody, these kind of basic laws that people are due anyway. But a lot of them have been predicated and built on actually putting some of the state's funds into Bitcoin. So these are all the ones that have been proposed. These blue ones are proposed. These ones here are real, or sorry, in progress. So these are actually moving through different parts of the government. These red ones have been rejected, and now we have a green one here. This is New Hampshire is the first one. And you can actually see using rainy day funds could purchase 3,236 Bitcoin. So all these states have what's called rainy day funds, or different types of funds that are based on like their mineral rights or different taxes they get as states, and they invest those in certain things. So this New Hampshire bill will actually allow them to invest in any digital asset that has a market cap above 500 billion. There's only one that does, which is Bitcoin, and hold it at a max of 5%. What do you guys think about this news?
Nah, this is honestly big. I mean, it's big for the state, and also it's big for Bitcoin too. Because I know it's 5%, but I have a feeling that it's gonna start at 5%, and then eventually they're gonna look at everything else they own, and they're gonna be like, wait, these things are performing like trash. Why don't we just add a little bit more into Bitcoin? And then, next thing you know, hey man, the floor for Bitcoin is gonna be rising, and yeah, man, we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of a couple different minds about the whole government's buying Bitcoin thing. I mean, obviously, it's a huge deal. We've come a really long way. It's evidence of how far we've come, and the game theory that Bitcoiners have been talking about for more than a decade, finally playing out. Of governments are going to have to want to get in on this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's a free open protocol. Bitcoin is for enemies. There's nothing we can do about it. I do find interesting this sort of. I'm not like a hardline libertarian or anything, but there's an argument on the other side that says everything the government has was taken from us. The government doesn't productively create anything. So essentially, why would we be championing for the government to just take our money and then buy Bitcoin for the government with our money? To some degree, you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit weird and ironic that we would be kind of excited about that. And then on the other side, if you just come from it's going to pump our bags side, that's one thing that's definitely going to happen. So I don't know. It's a little bit fuzzy line of how much do you want the government kind of in your corner, pumping your bags, and then how much do you want to kind of hold this if the government has any surplus at all, it should just give it back to the people kind of argument, right?
Yeah, no, I totally see that too. I mean, in theory, the government is supposed to take in that income. I mean, it's not producing it, but it's supposed to take that in and use it wisely, or use it in some way that benefits the people of the state. So if that were true, if we believe that, if we see that happening, then in theory, if they buy Bitcoin, which is this asset that appreciates so much, and then they use that responsibly. I mean, it caps it at 5%. So say we just take that as the law. They're not going to change it in the future. This is set in what they're doing. Then at 5%, which it's going to reach super fast because everything else is going to trend towards their Bitcoin holdings. And then it's going to basically, what's left there, they're going to have to rebalance. So do they rebalance into some other stuff? I don't know, but maybe they could rebalance into social programs for their state, which, would be beneficial for the people. If you believe that those kinds of programs are beneficial to people and not, propping up people and this kind of stuff, I don't know. It really depends on, again, like once we get into the state kind of stuff, it really becomes like political and and like what you believe governments should do. However, they do have money. They do allocate to things. It makes sense for them to allocate to Bitcoin because it's going to outperform anything else. But yeah, I mean, and then on top of that as well, it's like, yeah, it's going to pump our bags. But ultimately, and I posted this because it is really big news. I posted it and I just put a caption, it's news when this happens, when a government does it. It's not news when an individual does it, but when an individual does it, it's much more important. It's much more important that we all individually, the plebs, my neighbors, friends, family, we all adopt Bitcoin. That makes a way bigger difference. It makes so much bigger difference to the smallest person, the smallest portion of wealth in the world adopts Bitcoin. That's beneficial in my opinion.
And I agree with that. I don't think, like, I don't really care about like, oh, this government does this state does that. Really, like what I'm hoping for is that like when they do, like when like, the more the states buy them, like I'm hoping that people start to wake up and be like, oh, if they are buying it, maybe I should get some too. I think that's what I'm hoping for. Like, because I don't think they are gonna. I mean, maybe. What do you think? What do you guys think about like how is that gonna be? Is that gonna be beneficial? Like as far as like I don't know, and like like making the city better in a way, or is it gonna just be like a? I mean, I don't even know what the funds are gonna be used for really, or is it just gonna be a savings account? I mean, who knows? So I don't know.
Yeah, rainy day fund. So I guess it just really depends when they need to dip into that. So rainy day fund, I think typically is for like emergencies. So like, the state of Florida would have a rainy day fund to be able to backstop like insurance if insurance can't handle the repairs from like a hurricane.
I see.
Yeah, stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah.
Just want to answer this, and then John, maybe you could continue that question as well. But Jake asks, when will New Hampshire buy? This bill goes into effect in 60 days after it's been signed, and yeah, I don't know how they're going to buy. Probably algorithmically. Probably have, I don't know. They probably have a state-appointed portfolio manager for the rainy day fund, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think at the end of the day, like everything's good for Bitcoin, right? It's kind of the meme. So I do think it does fall into that category. So I don't want to be like a naysayer too hard. But the other thing I think is interesting is there is sort of also a theory that as much as these things create positivity and hype and maybe potentially positive price action and FOMO and interest on the front end, if and when the day comes where they sell it, that's going to be the counter effect. So to some degree, it could, on a longer time horizon, be a net neutral, because when New Hampshire has to sell its Bitcoin to cover some expense or decides to or whatever, you're going to get a lot of like, oh, they're dumping, oh, So there's going to be a lot of FUD out of that. So it's just another like, I'm not trying to like only come from the naysayer perspective, but I like to kind of, instead of just be like, oh, it's hype, oh, it's all good news, It's like, okay, well, what are the sort of nuances and the potential negatives that can also be part of it?
Yeah, and again, just another point to what Ralph was mentioning there. There's a lot of people that are drawn to Bitcoin because of like how it's outside of the system and for maybe the cypherpunk sort of ethos, and then like I'm drawn to it for that, and then I tell my uncle who's just worked like a traditional job his whole life that I'm into Bitcoin, and he says, oh, that's too risky for me, and it's like now I can be like, well, the state of New Hampshire owns it. It's like it's kind of like it can introduce a new group of people into it and really validate it in some ways, like kind of Trump's administration validating it as well. Like that, I think that was a big thing. Like these governments getting involved in it, I don't know, it goes against certain aspects of the ethos. It's good and bad. There's a lot of gray, but it does sort of validate it to a new section of people. And overall, I think more and more people need to get exposed to Bitcoin anyway. So I think in that part, it is a silver lining of it.
And I also wanted to say, like, I don't know if like, you know, like John said, the selling part of it, I don't because they don't have as much as, like, let's say a company like, you know, like Strategy, or like, you know, like other big companies. I don't know if a yo, what's up? I don't know if like them selling it for a hurricane would affect the price that much. I mean, maybe the news of it, maybe you will, but I don't know. Maybe like, because they can buy what, like right now, like maybe 3,000 Bitcoinish. I mean, I don't know. Maybe who knows? But we'll see.
Yeah, they're not a massive player. It's not going to affect it too much when they sell,
right.
or if they sell.
Yeah.
All right, Gen Z, what's up, man? Thanks for joining.
What's up, everybody? Sorry I was a little bit late. I had a couple appointments going on, but we are so back. Let's get into it.
All right. Yeah, we were just covering this U.S. strategic reserve, or the government
freezes.
Oh, yeah.
Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, you keep freezing. I don't know what's going on. I mean, hopefully we'll get a good connection here. But New Hampshire just passed a bill to buy some Bitcoin up to 5% of their rainy day fund. We've exhausted a lot of it, but if you just wanted to have some final notes there, or anything to add before we move on to the next one, go ahead.
No, that's awesome. You know, good for them. Obviously, there's a lot of states pushing these different bills, mostly just the right to self-custody, stuff like that. But these guys seem like they're actually taking action, right? I think there's that bill in Arizona, and then the governor struck it down. So she's an idiot. I actually ratioed her on X. You know, I responded to her latest thing, and then I was saying, hey, I was like, why do you hate your retirees and your people who have pensions? You know, why do you do this to the people of Arizona? Aren't you meant to serve them? And then I got more likes than the original post. That's the first time I've ratioed someone. So, you know, that was an amazing dopamine hit. I'm going to try doing that some more. So shout out to New Hampshire.
Yeah, nice.
Live free or die.
Yeah, live free or die. How crazy is that? That's their slogan. Living free or
up to
die.
Their slogan, man. That's what's sick about it.
All right, so we got this next one here. This is from Jesse Myers. Here, I'll bring that up. So this is a sort of a semi-famous chart within Bitcoin, and he's given a nice update to it. So the original one was actually from 2023. I didn't realize that it was already 2 years old, and he's updated it to 2025. And in 2023, the global wealth was 900 trillion. Today, that global wealth is 1,000 trillion. And there's some key insights here that are interesting too. Global assets on average growing at 6%. Seems pretty in line with probably money debasement, I would say. The CAGR of Bitcoin 120, gold 35, the rest in line roughly with that 6% or lower if you're unfortunately a bond bag holder. Yeah, some more metrics, but maybe we'll just go off of that. What do you guys think about the $100 trillion of wealth? Do you guys all feel like the world is $100 trillion wealthier than 2 years ago? What do you think?
I don't think that I got my fair share of the 100 trillion new dollars. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I got a 2% raise, man.
2%. Okay.
We went from 900 trillion to 1,000 trillion, and you got a 2% raise. You did not also get your fair share of 100 trillion new dollars.
That's true.
Yeah. Damn,
I'm not saying all of it was newly printed money, but you're getting poorer according to that chart. Sorry.
Hey man, it hurts. It hurts to think about, man. I know.
Seems like a scam, bro. Look, I'm gonna get Jerome Powell on the phone tonight. You know what I'm saying? Y'all don't have to worry about no more of this. You know, I'm ending the nonsense right now. I'm gonna get Trump on the phone tonight. Be like, hey, bro, I just saw a chart on Twitter. You gotta stop playing with me. I didn't get no pennies of that 100 trillion. What are you doing? You know, so I'll get it all sorted out, hopefully. But hopefully you guys understand that even with that new Coinbase commercial, which is really cool, by the way. You know, I was watching some of the NBA finals to play the commercial a couple times. My parents are there. I'm telling them, hey, y'all not paying attention. You know, there's Bitcoin commercials on the TV. Like, y'all not really locked in. You know, that's the real game going on, not the basketball game. That's the real game. You know, that's game theory playing out, you know. But
it's crazy that they played that on TV. I didn't see it, but that's wild.
Yeah, no, they played it on the for the NBA finals. But yeah, we'll play it right now in a second. But long story short, you know, you print all these dollars, they become less valuable. You know, if you print things, then you are making them less scarce. Bitcoin can't be printed.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ad here, we don't have the audio. I can't figure out audio. So it's just a visual representation of how many dollars are being printed daily, weekly, yearly, total. I mean, it's just insane compared to, and really puts in perspective the scarceness of the 21 million Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah. And
Bitcoin.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, Bitcoin, just when you put up that chart again, like, it's like real estate and like the bond market, they each like 300 trillion. Like Bitcoin, being like taking like, being 300 trillion is like almost like a no-brainer at this point. I mean, I don't know when, but like, I don't know, it's kind of like not a if but when at this point.
When I first saw this chart, I was thinking, okay, Bitcoin is going to just grow so much bigger and all of these are going to grow smaller. But I'm actually not so sure about that. I just think everything's going to grow.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin's also just going to grow faster. I mean, that's evidence right here, right? 120 CAGR, compound annual growth rate, right? Like gold also grew in size, compared to the other ones, not compared to Bitcoin, but compared to the other ones. Like, I think this is just going to grow. I mean, everything's going to grow. Like money is just being printed. And that's what this chart is really signaling to me, is that money is just, being printed. It's really not like people are getting wealthier. It's just going into assets.
Yeah, this one that you're showing right now, I love that chart so much, because it just shows, like, if you ever are like super deep into Bitcoin and you're thinking like, oh, like, am I really as early as I think I am? You zoom out and look at that and you're like, we are so early. Bitcoin is 0.02% of the world's wealth, essentially, right? That's 2 trillion out of 1,000 trillion, right? That's nuts. Like, if that, to me, of anything, just backs up like all the conviction where you're like, is it going to grow more? Is it going to go past 100,000, whatever? You're like, do I really believe Bitcoin's going to stay at 0.02% of the entire global wealth? Like, no chance. Like,
No way.
Like you said, it's going to grow for both reasons. One, more of those other squares and rectangles are going to get a little smaller, and more of that's going to flow into Bitcoin. And all of the squares and rectangles are going to get bigger relative to where they are now. So it's just like, yeah,
feels inevitable. And it feels like we've lucked out by finding something that is so mispriced. Like that is just such a mispriced market asset, like compared to those other things. I don't know. It's crazy to me. Those other, like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And that's great that it doesn't make sense, because it means that Bitcoin is cheap still. If it made sense to everybody, then it would be fairly priced, and a lot of the upside would be already seen. All right, let's move on to the next one here. This, you guys have probably seen some stuff about this. There's a little bit of news. This is kind of interesting. Apple lifts iOS restrictions allowing Bitcoin, crypto payments, and NFTs, and ends 30% Apple tax. So basically, this was all predicated on, or part of it was predicated on, a lawsuit they had with Epic Games, that when people used like the in-app currency, the V-Bucks, they would get charged, basically Apple would take around 30% of that cut because somebody downloaded the Fortnite through the Apple Store. Whereas if they did that on their, through Epic Games on their desktop or something, obviously Epic Games is going to take 100% of that. So there was all these things Epic was trying to do to go around that, and then there's all these court battles, and they settled or lost, or Apple lost or they settled. I don't really know the details on that, but basically within that as well, there was this thing that Apple did where they restricted Bitcoin and crypto payments within apps as well. So because of that lawsuit going through, they've had to change up a lot of their policy, and they changed up this one specifically as well. So this makes things like Nostr a lot more usable. This opens up a lot of potential development opportunities for mobile developers to integrate Bitcoin, Lightning. I mean, Bitcoin is internet's native currency, and Lightning is the way that's going to scale and work. And I don't know if you guys have played, like, there's these play to earn games that use Lightning. There's Nostr is really great for like micropayments to content creators, and it just works so seamlessly and it makes so much more sense. There's so much less friction and cost associated with the actual payments of these things. It just makes so much sense to use Bitcoin. And Apple's a huge part of the market share for this. So this lifting is actually massive, in my opinion.
So I feel like I'm a Debbie Downer on all these topics today, but the Debbie Downer part of this, not to throw cold water on it, but I was digging into this a ton today, trying to make sure I understood it correctly. Y'all can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but my understanding of it, and I was like digging into this, is that it's not as bullish as the headline. Everything on X makes it sound super bullish. And what it does is not that Apple is allowing or enabling native crypto payments within apps. Like you can't use crypto for in-app payments. They're only lifting the part that said developers can't point you to an outside payment and use crypto. Right? So it's not that you can use crypto payments in the app, which I think would be crazy bullish. If you could be like, oh, all of a sudden crypto payments are allowed within apps for in-app purchases and there's no 30% Apple tax, that would be wild. But what this does is say developers previously couldn't say, buy my thing, go outside to a third-party payment thing, and you can use crypto there. Now they can say, buy my thing, and here's my payment link, and you can pay with crypto outside of the app. So it's like a little nuance there that I think it's not quite as bullish as it seems like on X, but
yeah, I think also like that's what a lot of people have to do to use crypto payments within apps. So like that is like the way to do it. So by not being allowed to do that was very restrictive for the use case of Bitcoin still. So
yeah, it was like the thing where if you ever tried to sign up for Netflix in the Netflix app on your phone, you couldn't do it, right?
Yes.
And they couldn't even say, click this link to go to netflix.com to sign up. Now they can say, click this link to go to netflix.com to sign up. And if that Netflix or something else is a crypto thing that wants to take payments as crypto, they can say, you can pay with Bitcoin, click this link, go to our website and sign up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It makes it a lot easier for the users to understand what's going on instead of just terrible user interface, which was the case before.
Right.
Also, I didn't even know that was that 30% tax was a thing until that news came out. Honestly, what is Apple gaining out of all this? Honestly,
of changing it?
Yeah.
They're
just
not
more
gaining
like
anything.
They're not.
No,
Yeah.
they've
Okay.
lost. They've lost.
Yeah.
Like they would rather not do this. They'd rather have a
Right.
walled garden. They'd rather make it difficult for people to avoid the 30% tax, which was like the Netflix thing. Like Netflix couldn't say, oh, you have to go to our site and sign up through a browser instead of through the app because we don't want to pay 30% of the sign up fees and the monthly fees to Apple. They can't say that, but that's what they want. And now they can say that. So this was a big loss for Apple, which is the right thing. When you look at the law and you look at just the way systems should work, it doesn't really make sense for Apple to restrict so much and to just gatekeep and own and be this toll booth company. In my opinion.
Right. No, I agree. I feel like, is it just me or I feel like Apple is kind of like, I feel like it's almost getting to like a point where it's becoming a dead company. Like their AI is not the best AI. Like if you compare Siri to like, I don't know, like Gemini, Grok, or like ChatGPT, Siri's just a little, gadget to like, set your timer or whatever. Like I don't know what are they doing? I mean, this is not a Apple podcast, but like, I mean, I just feel like they're not doing anything for themselves right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an Apple expert, but they've locked a lot of people into services. I think a lot of their income comes from services like this. Their app store is huge. They make a huge amount of money on all the apps on there. Their main business model, though, as far as I know, is share buybacks. That's their main business. They just buy their own shares back to drive.
They're gonna be wrong. They got to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, otherwise they're toast.
Toast.
Take some of that 100 billion in cash or whatever they got.
I'm definitely
need to listen to some Michael Saylor podcast.
Apple, and I'm not an Apple fan personally, but anyway, let's go on to the we're gonna move on to. We actually got a question in the chat here. A couple different comments about ASST. This is a stock, another SPAC, another reverse merger for a Bitcoin treasury company. It was up 450% on the day. This is a company that is connecting to Strive. So I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with Strive. Let's go here. I'm just going to present it. It'll take 1 second. This is a company by Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's see. And they have, I think OwnB is their ETF that has a bunch of Bitcoin treasury companies. I believe that's by Strive. Essentially, they are going to combine with asset entities, which is just a blank check company as far as I know, to form the first publicly traded asset management Bitcoin treasury company. So they are going to create products for Bitcoin treasury companies. They're going to be a Bitcoin treasury company. They're up 450% on the day. I mean, this was huge news for people. And another interesting aspect that we'll get to here is the new team that's going to be on here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but some familiar faces, if you guys are fans of the True North podcast. Planned independent board directors Ben Workman and Jeff Walton are going to become board members on the team here, and Matt Cole as well, which I think he is he does the Hurdle Rate podcast with those guys. So pretty big news coming out about this new Bitcoin treasury company.
We got some people in the chat who are already up over 100% on this thing, man. So not financial advice, but you know, you might want to get out, because the one, what was the one last week? CEP, that one's already given away most of the gains. So not financial advice on that. But these, like, I don't have any, I'm not gonna say like these people can't be successful or this won't be successful. It's just starting to give vibes of like 2017 ICO kind of trend, right? Where, you know, every VC, not just in crypto land, but it's basically associated with like Sequoia Capital, or what's it called? Andreessen Horowitz et al. Started basically, oh, we're going to build our company, but we're going to issue a token, and that's how we're going to essentially fundraise. And then it basically becomes vaporware, because once they make all the money issuing the token, they just stop building the thing they were going to build, because like, oh, we're already rich, so like, why bother? Keep building it. And then it just becomes a pump and dump scam. So I'm not saying that that's what these are, but it's starting to give off these vibes of, you know, everybody's going to jump in and do this, and they're at this early stage, they're very unproven. Like the CEP, it's like the SPAC hasn't even merged, or whatever it was, hasn't even merged. You know, this one, like, so these guys are going to pump on these announcements, but that's a pretty risky buy, in my opinion, because as of this moment, it's not anything. They don't hold any of it's all promises. So I'm not saying that means it can't work, or like these people aren't smart, or they're not going to do what they say they're going to do, but it just has these vibes of how many companies can flood into the space and do this same thing, and how many of them will pump on the announcement, and then will they deliver on the promise? And MSTR has done a good job of delivering on the promise for a long time, and sort of built a lot of credibility. And then it's yet to be seen whether all the others who are going to flood in to do it will live up to that same sort of standard.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't know what this was. I just asked a guy in the chat, what is this? And then I went ahead and looked it up. Yeah, that's an amazing pump. That's extremely rare to see. But again, they do have an amazing team. The MSTR True North guys are the and this is an insult to them actually, but they're the roaring kitties of Bitcoin. You know what I mean? That is an insult to them. They're a little bit smarter than he is, and he did a great job, don't get me wrong. But with stuff like this, again, like you said, it is promises. There is a lot of risk, especially in the beginning, because with these Bitcoin treasury companies, they need to gain trust with the market the same way Sailor has, which is being predictable, being transparent, and then following through with what you say you're going to do and going hard at it. All right. Not buying 100 Bitcoin when you have this many assets under management, like not putting, 10% of the balance sheet into Bitcoin. Like, you need to go hard. Otherwise, it is not going to work. And then quickly, to have a mini rant about the Apple thing. Apple just became a designer brand, right? So it's all name recognition. And because they got so big, this is true for most of the Magnificent Seven. They don't really need to take risk anymore, right? everyone already agrees Apple's a good investment. You know, Nvidia is a good investment. Tesla's a good investment. Amazon's a good investment. And when everyone agrees with you, it's already too late, right? Now you're losing capital, right? Apple, Google, these guys who do these share buybacks, they're doing that because they're basically forfeiting the capital. They're forfeiting the profits that they have because they don't know what to do with the money. So instead of trying to grow the business or to take a chance with the business, they just want to maintain the status quo as best they can, try to grow very slowly, and then buy their stock back. So that way that the price looks like it's going up because they're able to outperform the S&P by doing so. So they're incentivized to do that. There's going to come a point where they're going to have to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet because they won't be able to outperform the rate of inflation. They're going to need to store their value in hard assets. The only hard asset that they can control as a regulated entity at the moment is a commodity like Bitcoin, since they don't want to hold T-bills, which lose value over time.
Yeah. And I think that the S&P 500, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but that might take a hit soon, because if none of the, if it's carried by the top 7, and the top 7, they're just holding cash. I mean, sheesh, when the time comes, man, I mean, I don't know. I feel like the S&P 500 is going to just, I don't know, the 400 and whatever companies that are trash companies are not going to be able to support it until they start putting these companies that have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, like MicroStrategy, 21, and I don't know, the new one, I don't know their name, but
Drive.
Yep, right. Until those companies start to be in there, and those companies are probably gonna end up being in the top 10 eventually at some point in the future. I feel like the S&P 500 is gonna be dead for a while. So I don't know. That's just me though. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Strive story is interesting because of the board, because of the team. It's also a company that already has a bunch of ETFs, and they have a lot of assets under management. They're getting fees for that. They can funnel that into Bitcoin. So their operating company, like, I don't know how profitable it is, because there's expenses with all that too. But I think they probably could run a profitable company if they aren't already. So in that area, I think they could capitalize on the Bitcoin trend and be a big part of that, issuing ETFs and everything. If you look into I think BTC overflow, Brian Brookshire, he had a great tweet about this. He's like, these Bitcoin treasury companies aren't Pokemon. You don't have to catch them all. You look at the 450 gain today. It's all good. You don't have to get every, you don't have to buy shares of every single Bitcoin treasury company. No one's catching MSTR. MSTR has a proven track record. It's like now MSTR is not enough for people. They're having to go out on the risk curve even more with these new ones. And I would just really be cautious about the quality of these and their actual ability to do what they say they do. Because if we look at some other examples, there's a company called UTXO Management, and all they do is invest in companies. And they have a strategy where they invest in companies to a large extent. So they're a large owner. And then they basically say, hey, this company's a Bitcoin treasury company now. It has $3 million of Bitcoin, which isn't even much. And then they get a bunch of hype and a bunch of public interest, and they pump up the stock. And then, not sure what else goes on behind the doors. There's a lot of owners that probably want to profit from that. Right. So just, this is starting to look like, back to John's point, similar to ICO stuff. Of course, they're building on the structure of Bitcoin, which actually has value. So they're better than all the ICOs already, but without a doubt, they will push out on the risk curve of acquiring debt, or just be operationally not as well suited as companies, and who knows what. So a lot of these probably will blow up. I'm not saying Strive will. I think Strive will probably end up doing well. Will it do better than all these other ones? I don't know. But it is something to look into, perhaps.
Yeah, I think they're new and novel and interesting right now, so they get a lot of hype. But it's, in my mind, it's kind of going to bring us full circle back to the philosophy that stock picking is difficult, because say in 2001 you could know that the internet was going to be successful, but you couldn't know exactly which companies built on top of the internet were going to be successful. And you couldn't, unfortunately, buy an underlying share of the internet that would let you share in the success of the internet, regardless of which companies won. So you had to kind of guess which company's going to win, which is why people buy the S&P 500 instead, because now you can buy a basket of all of them. But now you don't have to guess which Bitcoin treasury company is going to be successful, because you can buy an underlying share in the protocol that is Bitcoin, and you are virtually guaranteed to be successful as the protocol grows. So you can play the fiat games and the stock picking games if you want, if it's fun, if it's, you like the risk, or it's a small amount of your portfolio, whatever. But you can always remember that you can come back to the fact that you can buy an underlying share of the protocol itself, which guarantees that you succeed no matter which of these things built on top of it succeed or fail.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is one to look into more, I think. But yeah, I love that analogy of you can't buy a piece of the internet. The internet was the protocol that all of these businesses were built on top of. All the great businesses out there are all built on on the internet, and all the future best businesses will be built on top of Bitcoin, because it is the dominant protocol in for basically it's a financial protocol, and it's the dominant one in the new economy.
And like John said too, you just buy Bitcoin, because these companies have not experienced a bear market yet. So, it's gonna happen eventually at some point. So it's gonna hurt them. So buy Bitcoin, man.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, let's be quick on this one, because we actually got a lot of good questions I want to get to as well. So Strike, Jack Mahler's company, got a nice little freeze frame of this guy here. This is actually quite interesting. So he came out with Strike, Bitcoin-backed lending product, and there was a lot of questions, a lot of people saying a lot of insinuating a lot from the post. And he came out and addressed it in this 7-minute long video, which I thought was an interesting way to communicate with people, And this is a guy who's the CEO of what's soon to be, if all goes well, a public company that a lot of people are invested in, that we've talked about before, 21 Capital. So if he continues this type of communication, I think it's a fairly interesting sign of what possibly the transparency that could come from 21, and then 21 could benefit from that level of transparency in an industry that really likes a lot of verification as opposed to trust, right? But anyway, I'm going to tell you guys some stats about these lending products. 12% APR on your Bitcoin, or 13% APR at maturity. So you wouldn't pay that monthly, you'd pay it all at the end whenever that matures. Jack in that video says it's he's basically passing on the rates that they can get, and he believes that he can get it down into the single digits. Of course, 12 and 13% is really, really high for borrowing costs. Strike has the right to transfer Bitcoin to their partners. This was a huge point of contention. He basically said in other words that this is legal jargon and it is a collateralized loan. He's not lending it out and creating DeFi projects on the Bitcoin, but that's very normal for a collateralized loan, where the other entity that they're borrowing with, like the person or the company they've partnered with, can take that Bitcoin if you don't pay the borrowing fees. So they're working on proof of reserves for the collateralized Bitcoin, and the max loan to value is 50%. So you can get a loan for 50% of the value of your Bitcoin that you put up.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. If you're newer to Bitcoin in the last couple of years, just know that historically this stuff does not end well. That doesn't mean that's true this time around. I'm hopeful that the sort of creative destruction in the crypto ecosystem is better than in the fiat system, because in the fiat system, companies that are irresponsible and do things they shouldn't do with their customers' money, or go into too much debt or get too leveraged, can get bailed out by the central bank when it all goes wrong, which is what happened in 2008. And the central bank just buys all the toxic assets and lets one bank die, but saves the rest of them. But in the crypto industry, companies that do that, like FTX and Celsius, go bust. And that's a good thing that they go bust, even though it's a lot of pain in the short term. And the hope is that that makes the crypto industry more healthy in the long run, because the companies that come around to do it in the next cycle are stronger, more robust, do it more responsibly, and the consumers are more savvy about making sure that they don't just trust these people without without, proof or a little bit better credibility or track record. So hopefully we're in the next phase of these companies being more responsible and people don't just get wrecked from doing this. But everybody should know that historically products like this don't end well. So, that's up to everybody what they want to do with it. These products are going to exist whether we want them to or not. So it's interesting how it develops, but just be careful.
Yeah, I mean, we got someone who is a victim of Celsius, right? It was it Celsius, Gen Z? And that's like a lending. Was it lending or just like yield?
Voyager. And
Oh,
basically,
sorry,
yeah, you're
Voyager.
getting yield. Oh, if you hold this much USDC, this much BTC, you'll receive a yield every quarter. And it was happening, the yield was yielding until it wasn't. So
Right. So a little bit of a different thing than a lending product for sure. But yeah, I just think, and again, this is a tweet I posted, but like, you don't want to be the first person to buy a flying car. They're just going to get better and they're going to get safer. And that's the same thing with borrowing against your Bitcoin. You don't want to be the first one. I mean, Ledin has been very successful. They haven't lost any money. They're doing Bitcoin-backed loans at the same rate, 12%. But in my opinion, these are for people that are like literally debanked for some reason. Like that's the only reason that I can justifiably see that that it's worth doing that. It just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, you can get uncollateralized character-based loans for less APR than that for most people with any sort of decent credit score. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a way, like if you bought Bitcoin way back in the day, peer-to-peer or ATM, and you're non-KYC, you might want to do something like this, but I think probably Strike would need to KYC you anyway, so that's not really part of it. But yeah, I just don't really see the use case for this. There's also huge amounts of like, you need to put it a lot, like it's quite a lot of Bitcoin that you like, they don't have it just for like 0.001 Bitcoin. Like it's like lots of Bitcoin. So again, I just don't know who this is for. I really don't know who it's for. I really don't know who's going to use it. I know people will, but they're putting their Bitcoin at risk, and I would say unnecessarily so. If you don't need to borrow against your Bitcoin, I would not. But yeah.
And also, do you think this is a business that's not gonna last too long? Let's say Bitcoin goes to like 100, I don't know, million, whatever. And let's say, oh, actually, let me rephrase that. Let's say one sat equals $1, and then we start using, let's say a sandwich is now 10 sats. What's the need for a loan? We just using it as a peer-to-peer cash. That's not. I don't know. I don't see myself using that yet right now, but I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely see it as like an intermediary play. Like there's going to be a point where like who wants fiat at all? Like
right.
No, like fiat becomes useless, and then that there's no borrowing and lending with your Bitcoin. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I mean, it's just like this slight arbitrage thing. Like you could look at this and think, okay, well, Bitcoin's going to perform better than 12 or 13%. So I could get a loan for my Bitcoin and buy more. And this would be a way of just like leveraging up. That's one way somebody could use this. But again, you're getting really high rates that you could probably do better at with other things, with other assets. And I also think that, again, the other reason, right, that I said, you can get it better and safer. If you look at better, Jack said like, oh, I'm going to try to bring rates down to 1 digit. When other banks get involved with this, they're already doing, 4 or 5% loans on other types of assets. As soon as they start to realize how easy it is to collateralize Bitcoin, they're going to connect that into their already like financial system and offer way better rates. It's debatable whether that's safer or not, but it'll be better in that way. So again, it just seems like patience is what's needed here. And these products are maybe stepping stones towards a better system for borrowing and lending. And then eventually that'll just get phased out and we'll just be using Bitcoin. And there will not be a borrowing system for borrowing in fiat. I mean, maybe they'll still be borrowing maybe for other Bitcoin, but like it all ends up just being Bitcoin at a certain point. Any more to say on this, or should we move on to some questions? We got some good ones here in the chat.
It's time for questions.
Okay, awesome. All right. So, has GameStop bought yet? No, they did not. And I made a public declaration that I would sell at the end of April. And April 1st, I posted my 100 shares that I sold. And it's my most viewed tweet of all time. It's up almost 190,000 views. The apes stopped in to roast me on my 100 shares. Yeah, they hated that tweet. But I think that's I'm just part of like the Bitcoiners that are like, hey, Ryan Cohen, I'm not going to be patient for you. Like, I'm patient with Bitcoin. I'm not patient with holding anything that is un-Bitcoin, is not Bitcoin related. And you have not proven to me that GameStop is Bitcoin related yet. So I'm moving on to something that is. But yeah, no, they have not.
Yeah, no, like I've said many times, I've literally always said this. Ryan Cohen is an idiot, and now, again, he could prove me wrong at any moment. Maybe he comes out and he says, actually, we've been tapping this ATM daily. And that's the reason why, GME hasn't moved in price and we've been buying Bitcoin every single day. And now we're announcing that we have bought $4 billion. He'd be the GOAT. You know what I mean? He'd be in the GOAT conversation. You know what I'm saying? But again, he's not going to do that. So
No.
hopefully within this year, he buys Bitcoin, but I don't know. Again, that's why I bought long dated calls like 2027. You know what I'm saying? And it was only like 2 of them. So $1,000, I'm willing to part with it. I think he can figure out how to, press the buy button within 2 years. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm in with
maybe.
you on those long dated calls as well. So I'm just gonna hold and see what happens. It is what it is. If I lose that $1,000, hey man, took the risk. It is what it is.
Look at that. John stepped up as well. He made a comment on my tweet as well. And looks like you sold your shares. That's awesome. Good for you. I sold a bunch of calls on it throughout the month. I was selling weekly calls on my 100 shares. My shares went up around 29% in a month. Not a bad return. I'll walk away. If you know what, if Ryan buys Bitcoin, if GameStop goes absolutely parabolic because of it or whatever else, I'm super stoked for everyone along the ride. And I'm not at all going to feel like FOMO from that. I'm just, I sold it and literally bought MSTR. I'll be fine. But I really hope that they do buy Bitcoin, and I really hope the price does go up on their shares. All right.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about Bitcoin. Before we move on really quick, Sailor said this himself to Dave Portnoy, who's also an idiot. He said that Bitcoin is like a sports team where everyone can play, and also we're the best team in the world and we can't lose. You know what I mean? So that's kind of awesome. I do not like the GME guys. They got me my start in investing, but they also showed me my first ever cult. So they're all idiots for the most part, and they are very, they're rabid. You know what I mean? So they're also delusional. Again, there were smart people in there back in the day, but now it's just all degenerates and crybabies. So when you sell 100 shares, they will attack you. They'll be so mean to you. But at the end of the day, because Ryan Cohen's trying to align himself with Bitcoin, they will win. If they actually do that, they will win, which means that we win, which means we all win. So I think that's the most awesome thing. That's why you can't hate Bitcoin if you understand how it really works.
Yeah, we all win, and I will attest there are some dumb people holding GameStop. People were calling me bot, like they were literally thinking that I was a bot for selling my 100 shares.
You were paid by Citadel.
Yeah, dude, there were people accusing me of that. I'm like, they can't be serious, but no, they're totally serious. They think that I 100% like I'm trying to create a ruckus here and that I'm paid to do so. It's just like, no, I just said something and yeah.
You were hired to spread FUD. You're paid hourly. Oh my God.
I wish. All right. So appreciate you all. I find it hard to understand the ETFs as if you cash out, it will be in fiat. Thoughts. So my first thought is BlackRock has actually been pushing to have in-kind redemption. So you could actually redeem your Bitcoin. That hasn't happened. There are other jurisdictions where that stuff is more common, but it's not really super common for in-kind commodity ETFs at all anyway, which in Bitcoin is registered basically or qualified as a commodity. But yeah, you're playing fiat games, you're holding a Bitcoin IOU. Any additional thoughts on this question here, guys?
Yeah, I think even if the whole thing about in-kind redemptions is like, I've seen headlines about that, and people think that means, oh, I'll be able to just redeem my IBIT shares for Bitcoin. I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's more like in kind on the back end when like they're buying with their like authorized through like JP Morgan and all this stuff. My understanding is the in kind is more about like the way things happen behind the scenes, much less than that it'll ever be a consumer facing, like you can just sell IBIT for BTC. I would not expect that would ever be on the horizon. But
have you looked into that, John? Because I'm actually not too familiar with that. Is that you've looked into that, and that's the way that you think it will play
I'm
out?
pretty sure that's what it is. Like, because I remember seeing like people saying, "Oh, is it going to be in kind?" And people thought that meant consumers could just redeem IBIT for BTC. But I looked into it, and it's basically like has to do with what goes on the back end of how IBIT gets its Bitcoin.
Huh.
I could be wrong, but I'm 90+% sure that that's not likely that you'll ever have a chance to just sell IBIT and get BTC for it.
It almost becomes like a Bitcoin exchange if that was the case. Like if you could sell IBIT and buy and get Bitcoin out of it, it's like then it's almost just like another way to buy and sell Bitcoin.
And I don't know of any. I mean, this could be wrong too, but I don't know of any other ETF that you can redeem that way. Like you can't redeem a gold ETF for gold. You can't redeem an oil ETF for oil. You can't redeem an ETF built on top of another security for that underlying security, and that I can think of.
Bobby says here that SLV is the biggest spot silver one, and supposedly you can, or well, he's saying that lets big holders withdraw actual silver. And I know in Hong Kong, they were going to have in kind for their Bitcoin ETF, and it would be consumer facing. So that is possible in other jurisdictions. And I'm not 100% sure. Like I haven't looked into this, but just a comment from Bobby.
Yeah. I think, but even in that case, I think it's like he's saying big holders like you and me couldn't do that for like $25 worth of silver, like I don't think, but
no, definitely not. That's another reason that metal-based money is a problem, right? Like it doesn't really make sense unless it's in the large scale, and silver being worth so little as well. It's just never makes sense. People think it's going to become, remonetized, all this kind of stuff. There's just
just real quick, like just like Perplexity did real quick says in-kind redemption for BlackRock IBIT shares means authorized participants, which are typically large institutional investors or broker dealers, can redeem ETF shares directly for actual Bitcoin rather than for cash. So that's I think what's on the table in terms of like what IBIT's trying to get passed, but that's only authorized participants who operate at the institutional level are eligible to participate in in-kind redemptions, not available to ordinary retail investors.
There you go. And Tamara says here that the Australian BTC ETF is offering payout in Bitcoin. So I think it is possible with Bitcoin because there's so many less hurdles. Like it can be transferred physically, and it could start with authorized participants and move on down if it became profitable basically for them to do it, or the regulation became easy for them to do it and the demand was there, right? Because that's the thing, right, is if one of these ETFs could get approval for that, that would be an advantage for them over the other ETFs, and therefore lead to more market share. So I mean, I think they would fight for that because of that reason. That would be, just thinking about game theory from an outsider's perspective, that could be a reason why they would want that. All right. How have your orange pilling method skills evolved? Have you guys gotten better at orange pilling throughout time? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting better means not trying to orange pill people who aren't interested in it at all, right? Like not trying to force anybody. Like I think it means stepping back and letting them come to you. Don't try to force it on anybody who's not interested. And even if you are talking to somebody, let them ask questions first and find out what they want to know or what they already believe. Because if you start with whatever you want to say, you're probably a huge mismatch from what they already think they know about Bitcoin, or what they want to know, or what misconceptions they probably have.
Yeah.
Gen Z, sound like you were going to say the same thing.
Dude, Gen Z,
sounds similar.
Gen Z, you had an absolutely insane tweet. You said, how many people do you orange pill a week or something like that? It's crazy.
I was saying like an average of 2.
That's
one seems a little low. But the reason why I say 2 is because, one, I am in a sales role. I do have a sales job, and I actually try to target Bitcoin companies very often. And because I do that, what'll happen is a lot of the people that I close have the highest revenue in the whole office. And then that leads to people asking me about, hey, I thought Bitcoin was digital. What do you mean you work for a Bitcoin mining company? What does that mean? What does a Bitcoin miner look like? So their natural curiosity, I'm already friends with everyone there. So then they want to ask me about how are you having success with these companies? What do they do? Why is their commodity so valuable? Right. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, I haven't been posting it like I'm supposed to because I'm just building up the content, but I go down to very popular areas where there's a lot of foot traffic. I interview people, whether young or old, drunk or sober, and I talk to them about credit scores, money, and Bitcoin, of course, and I try to give them Bitcoin. I try giving it away. Anyone who talks to me, I give them 10,000 sats. So if they have Coinbase or if they have Cash App, I show them how quickly you can send Bitcoin to someone using like a lightning network. And then when I scan their QR and they see it pop in their account, they're like shocked. They didn't know that you could send it so quickly. So I would say probably 2 people a week. And I'm not saying they turn into hard-pilled, orange pillars like us. Like they don't know everything about it. They just seem like they're open to Bitcoin because someone that they know or someone who seems kind of interesting to them spoke to them about it from a position of knowledge and from a position of wanting to be an educator rather than to talk down to them or anything like that. So I think because there's already a relationship there, they're more willing to talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, man. That's so cool.
I
Ralph,
like
did
it
you have
at
anything
work.
to add there?
Yeah, like I like it when at work, like sometimes like I usually like to wait for people to just be like, man, why is this thing so expensive? And I'm like, let me tell you a little story. I just wait for that opportunity technically. But it's like it's one of those things that even if you like talk to people about it, like you can have the best explanation, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's like kind of up to them to make the final decision. It's like I can tell you that this thing is going, the M2 money supply is going by this rate. I can tell you all of that, but like I don't know if I truly orange pill someone until like a few years later when they're like, hey, thank you, by the way, for telling me about this. So I don't really know what my orange pill rate is actually. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. So we only got a couple more minutes here. We'll try to get through some of these questions. If a company tried to buy 5,500 Bitcoin all at once, Bitcoin price would go through the roof. Not a question, but I just thought this was very interesting. So there's the price of Bitcoin as of now, but there's the price of acquiring a certain amount of Bitcoin. And that price is actually higher because it would drive up demand as you purchase it. And more than 500,000 Bitcoin is quite a lot. So there's the they're talking about strategy. Paul is talking about strategy here. Strategy has all that Bitcoin and they price it or they value it at its current price. They don't value it at what it would cost to buy that today. But it's much, much more valuable than what they're saying it is, or what the market is saying that it is currently. Now, you could think in the reverse side of that, if they tried to sell all of that, then it wouldn't be as valuable as what it is today, because it would do the exact same, but in the opposite way. It would drive selling pressure and momentum and all of that, right? So it'd be a giant signal, and other people would sell too. So again, if you try to sell it, it's not worth as much. If you try to buy it, it's worth much more. So markets are always made on the margin of buyers and sellers. So it's very tough to say what something's worth beyond just a moment in time. But yeah, just an interesting comment. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to what I was saying there.
I think maybe it was last week we talked about it a little bit, or the week before. Same thing where it's an institution who does try to do that is going to do it as surreptitiously as possible, right? They're not just going to spot buy, 500,000 Bitcoin, because they know, like what you were saying, which is that there's going to be a ton of slippage. They're not going to be able to actually get it for market price. They're going to drive the price up like crazy. So they would do that as quietly and secretly as they possibly and humanly could, and probably take as long as they could. So that could, that's your thing of like GME could have been buying this whole time and we didn't know, and then they announce it and it moons. But yeah.
True. All right, so this one here, will Tesla accept Bitcoin to buy a car again? Elon sort of famously tweeted that they would after Bitcoin becomes more environmentally friendly. It's has been trending up in renewable energy usage since then. It's at like 57% roughly, and Elon hasn't tweeted or talked about Bitcoin publicly for years now. So unlikely. I don't know why not. I think he was sort of humiliated by other like Bitcoin maximalists who knew a lot more than he did, and he talked about he talked down about Bitcoin quite often, actually, and I think he was just kind of proven wrong, in my opinion, and doesn't want to fill out the ego test form yet. He's not ready to do the ego test. That's what I think with old elongated muskrat there.
Yep. Bitcoin is an ego test. It's an intelligence test. It's an everything test. But unfortunately, he failed. And also, maybe his handlers told him to stop talking about Bitcoin. I don't know. You know what I mean? Either way, he's cooked. And if he doesn't want Saylor to pass him in net worth, he's got to fall in line. You got to bend the knee. It is what it is.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Unclear whether he understands Bitcoin or not, or whether he just likes trolling people with Dogecoin. Unclear whether he actually understands it.
Good point. He understands payment systems. I mean, he helped build PayPal and stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean he understands money. One last one here, guys. Will Bitcoin ever be tax-free? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
What was I listening? I was listening to something today maybe it was Matthew Cratter, and I was like, basically, this is the number one thing that we should be fighting. I know you're in Canada for us, but like U.S., this is the number one thing we should be fighting for is cap gains tax removed from Bitcoin. That's a much bigger deal than SBR, any of the other stuff. Like that should kind of be like our number one thing on the agenda. I don't know if it will ever. I mean, maybe someday. I don't know. Who knows what the timeline is, but that would be a bigger deal than basically anything else.
I agree completely. And I had a conversation with somebody that disagreed with that. But I think it's just, I think cap gains is a way that the government is suppressing the use case of money and trying to control capital and trying to force people into dollars. I think, and that's kept Bitcoin, that's kept one of Bitcoin's major use cases down. It's still a store of value. It's very difficult to use it as a medium of exchange when there's capital gains on every single transaction you do. It's very disruptive. But I think it's Jor who kind of opened my eyes up to this. He kind of theorized that, I believe it was him. I'm giving him credit either way. He said that there's going to be an incentive for countries and areas to become tax-free because that will drive innovation and capital there. And then that will allow people to give up their Bitcoin, which is incredibly valuable. And it's the only way to get Bitcoin into circulation, and therefore states and governments and nations to actually be able to acquire it, because otherwise it's too difficult to get any. So that is a really good theory. I think that's very possible. And then it becomes game theory of, okay, what is the most friendly place to Bitcoin when it comes to taxation? And I could see that happening in the future.
And I will move. Hey, I don't care.
Ralph's on record. Yeah, he's like, I'll be out of here. I think that's actually the game theory of that whole thing is fascinating. Like Bobby said in the chat, if it goes tax-free, it'll wipe out the financial system, because why would you invest in anything else? Because that's true. Like there are a lot of people who fight it because they say, well, that's not fair as an investment. That one investment doesn't have capital gains tax on it. But like you said, every other country that's not the US is going to be incentivized to make that, or maybe not every, but like there's a lot of countries that will be incentivized to do that to attract capital and investment. And the more of them do it, will put pressure on other countries to do it. But the US is incentivized to do it last because they'll be terrified of what it'll do to every other investment and to the medium of exchange properties of the dollar. So like, I don't know. I think that's kind of wild how the game theory of that might play out internationally.
It's pretty hard to predict. Yeah, it's pretty hard to predict. And the US is going to try as much as it can to continue to export its dollars and continue to be the reserve currency, because they can basically extract value from the rest of the world at almost zero cost by just exporting dollars to do so. It's just, it's very tough to know how it all plays out, but I think there is the potential for some regulation to change in favor of use of Bitcoin as a currency. And then therefore, it's like here in Canada, we have we're taxed when there's a foreign exchange tax if you exchange currencies, but it's like if you were able to hold Bitcoin and you're able to use Bitcoin, you're never exchanging it into another currency. You're actually just using it natively. So I don't know. It just makes a lot of sense. It just makes, just seems like that's the way to go. I'm going through a tunnel. Am I? Is it noisy?
No,
You're chopping
little
him up a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry guys.
Either way,
all right.
it's all good.
All right, that's about it, you guys. We're actually over an hour. We usually do these for an hour weekly. There might be some interruptions coming up in the next little while, as I'm having a daughter very soon, but we'll try to
Let's
Yeah,
go.
we'll
Oh my God,
try
the
to keep it
simultaneous
going.
clap. Let's go, boys.
Yeah, thanks, appreciate that. But yeah, maybe one of you guys could carry it on while I'm not able, or we'll just get back to it after that. We'll see.
What month?
Sorry,
What month?
this month.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, due date's end of the month, but could
Congrats,
happen earlier,
man.
could happen anytime. So I'll keep you guys in tuned into that, and we'll see if we can keep doing these. Cool, awesome, thanks guys. John from my favorite thing about Bitcoin on YouTube, Gen Z BTC on YouTube as well, and Nurse Hodl on YouTube. Go check them out. Thanks guys for your time today. That was fun. I will see you later.
Peace.
Thank you. See you guys.
Look at that candle.
Ooh, it's